Hi everyone, it's Slippery Mongoose here. Today we're going to do a video on changing out our steering head bearings. Just in here. And I'm going to show you all the steps of stripping everything in your front and back, replacing the bearings, greasing the bearings, reinstalling them, and putting all that together. So sit back and enjoy. Our first step is to loosen our bolt for our front wheel here. So on the other side of this, I have a 17mm socket and my breaker bar, and on this side I've got my ratchet with a 19mm socket. So it just goes on there, and we're gonna loosen this nut off here so that when we jack the bike up, our bike is already on the center stand. So when we jack the bike up, we'll be able to just take everything off and won't have too much trouble getting any of these bolts out. So what I've done is, using the scissor jack out of my car, I've just jacked the bike up underneath the sump like so, and it's just jacked it up high enough so I can get my chassis stand here. I made this chassis stand myself out of a couple of bits of box, piece of plate, and 4 bits of angle line and a bolt. And these things are absolute magic, and if you're doing any work yourself on cars or bikes, they're an absolute must-have, because you never leave a bike or a car supported solely by a jack, because if the jack goes and you're underneath it, could turn out very bad for you. So what I'll do now, just got a bit of rag underneath the exhaust cross piece. It should support things nicely for what we need to do. There's not going to be a lot of weight. The exhaust is bolted in very nicely here, so that should be alright. So we'll just lower our scissor jack down, and down it goes. The weight's off the jack, so we just screw that down. I've taken the nut off our front axle bolt, and now we'll work on removing the 2 bolts here for the caliper. You'll need a 14mm socket to do that. You'll need a 10mm socket or a spanner for our bolt here for the brake line to remove that. We will remove the front wheel, and then we'll remove the front wheel arch and the brace, and then we'll move on to removing our headlights, indicators, and our gauges, etc., etc. Okay, so now the wheel is removed. All it was required to do that was just give the end of the bolt a gentle tap with a hammer, and you should be able to just pull the bolt through from the other side. That's from your left hand side if you're sitting on the bike. And then just with a bit of care and everything, the wheel should just be able to roll out, and you should just twist the wheel and it'll fit around your caliper here without damaging the wheel. I also forgot to mention here, there is this other bolt here that holds your speedo drive. You should also be removing that. So just quickly here, I just got a 10mm socket on the end of this 3-inch extension. I've already cracked all the bolts. So that will come out. Just underneath the wheel here, there is these four nuts and bolts that hold on the wheel arch. What you need to remove those is an 8mm socket from down below and a 3mm Allen key or Allen wrench. So it's just a matter of undoing the four bolts and your wheel arch will drop away. Simple as that. Okay, we're going to remove the fork brace now. All you need for that is a 4mm Allen wrench, 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remove them all and take them out. When I actually do my steering head bearings, I'm going to make my own fork brace out of aluminium. It should be much stiffer item, much nicer. Now we're ready to remove our front headlight, and we're going to do that with a 10mm socket. Just on these 2 bolts here, 2 around the other side, loosen them off, and we're just going to drop the headlight down. Rightio, we've loosened the headlight off of its bracket. I just forgot to mention the small adjusting nut here. That also has to come out, but luckily that's a 10mm as well. So now we just have the headlight dangling here. And now we're going to remove our forks. So to do that, we'll need let's see, an 8mm Allen head for here, and looks like let me get the camera around. Right here, a 6mm Allen head. It's also a good idea at this point, if you're going to work on the forks themselves, replacing seals, etc., just to crack open these nuts here while they're all clamped up. That way when it comes to taking everything apart, it's a lot easier to come undone. So we've loosened our bolts on the top and the bottom clamps. So now it's just a matter of just gently wiggling like this. Just move the tools out of the way, just gently working the fork down. Okay, near the bottom here, I don't want to drop it too much. And there. That's our right side fork out. Just lay him down. Now the left side, using the same technique. The left side's coming much easier. And pop! Out she comes. So from here we start focusing on removing our instrument clusters, our handlebars, and getting everything out of the way so we can access our steering head here. So at this point, all I've done is removed the indicator mounts here from where they were in between the 2 clamps. I've undone the 2 10mm nuts that wanted here. They're holding the gauge cluster down. I've just let everything drop forward. So next step is going to be we're going to remove our handlebar bolts here. Looks to be a 6mm Allen head. Now at this point, if you want, you may want to remove your fuel tank just to protect it from any damage that may occur. Okay. With the tools I'm using today, I'm using an Allen head socket that fits on the end of my half-inch socket here. It's very handy. So everything's going to be out of the way here from me hitting the tank when I undo everything. So if you don't have that, or if you're a little bit worried about your skills about missing the tank, I would recommend removing the tank if you wanted to. So we're going to go ahead now, remove our handlebars. So we've removed our handlebar clamps here with our 6mm Allen head bolts in them. So now what we're going to do is just going to pick the handlebars up like so. I'm just going to lay them down here. So what I have here is my breaker bar with a 22mm socket just on our top nut here. I've already cracked the nut open, so it does look very easy, but this top nut isn't meant to be under much strain anyway. So anyway, we will remove that and get with taking our stem out. So we've just removed our top clamp here after we've taken off our bolt. It's just lifted down, and I'm just leaving it dangle right here. If you're worried about sort of any tension under the wires, I mean, you could pull everything up if you wanted to. I mean, about the only tension there is here. I know this wire that leads into our, where does that lead? Leads into our clutch. So that's our clutch cable. I'm not too concerned about it at this stage. It's not going to be hanging like this for long, and honestly, it's not that much weight that it's supporting, so I'm not too worried. So anyway, next we move on to our lock nut here. The ideal tool to use here is what's called a C spanner. Because it looks like a C, it has a notch in it that fits perfectly in with these notches here, and you can safely remove it and not damage the notch here. As you can see with this notch here, it's been damaged from someone, namely me, using a punch on it for tightening it up. So what we do, because I don't have a C spanner unfortunately, I have to use a punch, but luckily because this lock nut isn't under much tension, we can use a punch here, undo the nut, and then we can drop our stem out. So we use the punch to loosen up our stem, and as you can see now, this is coming out. I'll just stop here because if I keep going any further, this will just drop out of here and onto the headlight and might cause a bit of damage. But I just wanted to show everyone what was happening next. Okay, so we've just removed the stem out, and we're having a look at our bearings here, and as you can see, all is not well with these bearings. I was having a few problems with the handlebars going into a right hand corner at about 100 kilometers an hour. If you go into a fairly decent corner, the handlebars would start to shake around on me a little bit. It didn't really want to go through the corner very well. And as you can see with the top bearing here, these marks here, you can see with my fingers. In the industry, that's what we call rust staining. So obviously a bit of water has gotten in there and started to rust the bearing. And if you can see all of these lines here, they're what's known as brunelling. So that's where the inner cone of the bearing, that's this here. That's basically been going like this. And obviously not that dramatically, but that's what it's basically been doing inside this bearing here, and that's what's caused all those lines there. You can see it's even more profound on the underside. I'll try and show you that. Don't know how this is going to work out. Here we go. So as you can see here, causes more rust staining and a lot more brunelling. So it's a good idea we're changing these out. So next what we're going to do is remove the outer shells or the outer cones of the bearings and then get on with replacing them. Okay guys, we're back now. Just to give you an update of what's happened. Wasn't able to show you a couple of things that I did while I was going. It's been a couple of days. I've been waiting for parts to come, and they've arrived. So in the meantime, just off camera, I made myself this tool here for getting the bearings out of the stem here. Basically, it's just a piece of a mild steel rod with a bend in the middle here, and with a bit ground off the just the end here, and that perfectly fits in. If we get down here, it perfectly fits into where the bearing race used to be there, and it only took me about 10 seconds really, and I was able to knock the old race out of there. So yeah, very handy thing to have. So basically, yeah, just a piece of metal bar there, you know, sort of 12-15 mil in diameter, with a bend maybe or 4 or 5 inches from one end, just like that. Don't make it too steep, otherwise it won't fit inside the stem. So yeah, just another thing I'll show everybody that I wasn't able to show just because of my circumstances. I've pushed off the old bearing off the old stem here, and this is my new bearing with the new seal on the bottom, all packed full of grease, all pushed on and ready to go. What we're going to do now is push our new outer race here into our stem up here. It's a brand new NSK bearing. So first up, I'll give the inside of that a quick wipe out and a spray it with some degreaser, and then we'll come back and hopefully we'll get a good shot of me installing the new bearing. So I've just started installing the lower bearing. I'll just put it up there. A nice, sorry, I got my finger in the way there. A nice little trick to use is to actually put this outer shell of the bearing in the freezer overnight, and that way the metal constricts and it's just that little bit easier to get in. And so far I've just used again my trusty dead blow hammer. It's plastic, so it's not going to damage the bearing in any way, and just basically hit it in there nice and square, and I'll just hit it in there a little bit more, and then we'll start on tapping it all the way home with the old bearing. Okay, so we've got our bearing installed now, and if you have a Haynes manual, it'll show you a trick where you can use a piece of threaded rod and 2 large washers and a couple of nuts. Basically the washer just fits in here and the other one on top, and you can install the other bearing at the same time, and as you screw in the 2 nuts on the piece of threaded rod, it jacks the outer races of the bearings into their positions. If you don't have that, here's another trick you can use. This is the old RS bearing shell, and using this very outer lip here, fits perfectly up in here, and using your soft hammer, I can't show you exactly here, I need 3 hands to do it, you can hit the bearing home into its place, and you can do the same with the other side. But the other side's even going to be a bit easier because you're not hitting up against it. So if you do use this method, just be very aware of where your fingers are in relation to the hammer, because it could end badly for you. But yep, it's nicely in its place in there. I'm very happy with it. And now we'll do the top one. Alright, so we have our new bearing here installed using the same technique with our dead blow hammer, and of course with our old race here, just pop him on the top like that and hit him on top of the hammer with your soft hammer. Okay, so something I wasn't able to show you guys with the bottom bearing on the triple clamp there was packing the bearing. So what I have here is a good few pumps of some marine grease out of my grease gun there. And again, I need 3 hands of this, so you're not really going to be able to see the technique. But what you basically do is take your bearing and you basically tap it into the grease, and you go round and round and round until all the grease is gone and it's all covering the bearing, and that's how you can pack a bearing. Of course, if you've got a bearing packer, you can use that too. If you have a lot of bearings to do, that's probably a very good way to do it, but if you're only doing 1 or 2 bearings like we're doing here, can end up being a little bit more messy than what you're really intending it to be. But you know, it's up to you. If you have a bearing packer, by all means use it. It's a great way to do it. Right, so just before we install our bearings in our steering head here, I'm just going to get my grease gun, one-handed like this, and give it a good couple of dabs of grease. Like so, just in the top there, just to prime the raceway for the bearings. Because these bearings aren't, well, they're not doing a lot of high-speed rotation, it doesn't matter if you put too much grease in there. If anything, it's going to protect the bearings from going rusty. So we'll do a couple of pumps up here and a couple of pumps down the bottom, and I'll quickly just show you. Over here, so this is my bearing that I've packed, and just with a bit of extra grease. Okay, so we've just installed our top bearing into place there. He's just sat nicely in there, and got our lower bearing here on its stem all ready to go. He's got an extra smear of grease over there just to be sure. So now it all comes up through the bottom here. Just like so. And it slots in right there. So I'll stop it here and I'll be able to put our nut on. Righto, so we've got our adjustment nut on there. I forgot to actually tell everyone that you actually put your top seal on here, and then the nut goes on. And on the nut you'll notice it has a shoulder on one side, and that shoulder obviously goes down and through the seal and holds everything together. So once we're down to this point here, this is where we give we give everything a good turn, like so. We tighten the nut just a little bit more. And we don't want to go too tight here, but all we want to do is just make sure everything's nice and home. Get a few rotations. Tighten it up a little bit. Give it a few more left to rights like that. And I'm only doing things hand tight here. You don't want to go too tight, otherwise you could crush the bearing, and we'll end up with the same problem we had. So it's all just fine hand movements here. I think the torque settings in the Haynes manual or your climber manual, they're they're not too great in value, so we're just doing things here by hand. Give it a good left to right. Make sure the bearings are doing their job. A little bit tighter. And touch tighter again. And we're good. Just have a look down here at where it all goes together. And the seal, I want to do it with the camera here. The seal looks to be in its place. All very lovely. The movement's nice and smooth. So yeah, and from here, it's basically the reverse procedure of putting everything back into place. Righto guys, so to bring you up to speed, I've installed my top triple right here, put the nut on and torqued them up to its correct setting. Reinstalled my gauges here, and my lights. They're held on the bottom here with the 10mm nuts, or you need a 10mm socket to do them up. And I've set the indicator mounts here. So what we're going to do next is reinstall the forks and tighten up the fork clamps. Right, so we're now going to install our fork. So to start with, I've just taken the lower bolt out of the clamp here, and just I've got a small cold chisel and just hit it in there a few taps, and that way it spreads out the clamp a little bit so the fork can fit up and into it a bit easier. So, and I've already started the fork here. So basically it's the reverse of the installation. We just pop the fork up. Okay, now it's through to the other side. And now just got to line everything up. Just with a light twisting motion, twist everything up until it's sticking through the top there. Then we can take our chisel out that we put in the lower triple clamp there, and that's the fork back in. Now just quickly we'll just orientate the fork. So just stand up here. Orientate the fork so that it's pretty much straight up and down, so the axle is going to line up. The straighter we can make it now, I mean it will line up when you reinstall your wheel and your caliper and everything else, but the straighter you can get it now the better. It makes things easier for you. So go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so we have our left fork back in its place, and now what we're going to do, before we tighten up our clamps on the fork, we're just going to make sure our forks are sitting evenly in the clamp. I've already adjusted my right side fork, so if we can just get down the camera here. You can see here that the fork cap is just flush with the top surface here, so we're going to do that with the other side. So with our hammer, we're going to do the same. Looks pretty good. Now it is important to make sure that when you put the forks back in, they are sitting evenly in there. If they're not, you could run into all sorts of handling troubles, and also you will probably have a fair bit of trouble getting your wheel and your axle back in. So just to make doubly sure, if you're really paranoid, we just get our ruler here, and I'll see if we can get a good measurement here. So clean that up. So that's around 2 millimeters, and we'll come around the other side, and we'll do the same. And this one's sitting at just above 2 millimeters. So get our hammer again. It wasn't sitting very much above 2 millimeters, but if you can get things to within sort of a half a millimeter of each other, that's going to be pretty good. So yeah, and now we're going to torque up our top and lower bolts here to their torque settings with the Allen keys, or with the Allen sockets and the torque wrench, and then we'll get on to reinstalling our headlight. Right, so now what we're going to do is install the bottom fork clamp bolts and torque them up to spec. So just got a bit of Loctite here on the end of the bolt, just a drop. That's all we need, and now we're going to install it. Now we're going to torque up the bolt we just installed. The Haynes manual says from 25 to 40 Newton meters, so I've got my torque wrench here set to 40 Newton meters. Okay, and done. The important thing to know when you're using a torque wrench is not to use a short sharp motion like that. It's very important to use a smooth action, and that way you can get an accurate tension on your bolts. So we'll go ahead and do the other side, and then we'll do the top bolts. Right, so now we're going to install the top clamp bolt. The bolt here's just got a drop of Loctite on it. We're using a 6mm Allen socket here. I'll switch hands on the camera, and in she goes. Now the torque setting for this bolt is less. Again, the Haynes manual recommends, I think, 18 to 28 Newton meters. So I've got my torque wrench set to 28 Newton meters, and again we'll just show a bit off camera here so you can see the whole shot. And it's a nice smooth action. like so. Done and dusted, 28 Newton meters. So we'll go ahead and do the other side. And it's also a good idea that once these bolts are done up, that you do up your fork cap bolts. Okay, I wasn't able to find an actual torque setting in my Haynes manual, either because I just can't see it or it doesn't exist. So I'm going to just tension the top cap here just up to 35 Newton meters. It's sort of just a firm tightening, like that. And on the other side. And that should do us. Righto, now it's time to reinstall our handlebars. I know in previous shots you've seen the instrument cluster on here. I've just off camera tried reinstalling the bars. I've actually put brand new handlebars on the bike and they won't actually fit over the top of the instrument cluster. So I've just had to quickly take the instrument cluster off. Again, just telling everybody it's just a case of 2 nuts and washers and those wire holders just here. That's all holds the instrument cluster on. And that's just dropped down. So just getting our handlebars here, lifting them back up and sitting them just roughly where they go on their clamps. And now we can put the cluster back on. Right, now we have our cluster back on. It's time to clamp down our handlebars. Now when you clamp down the handlebars, it's very important to make sure that this small dot here is facing upwards on both the clamps, because you'll see on the clamp itself we can't see too well with it here. But it's vital that dot is facing forward because if you come over the other side here, you'll look, there's no gap on the clamp here, but you'll come over this side, a bit of paint out of the way, you'll see there's a gap here, and on the other side where I've already tightened it down, there's also a gap. That gap is what actually provides the clamping force on the nut, on the Allen bolt, sorry. So anyway, after you have the handlebars sitting roughly where you want them, for these purposes here, I'm just sitting them down. I'll go and do a final adjustment on them later. But we'll just go ahead and tighten them down. And the tension on these handlebar nuts isn't very much at all. From memory, the Haynes manual says 8 to 12 Newton meters, so not very much at all. Me personally, I've put the tension wrench on these. I've gone to 20 Newton meters because that's the last thing you want on the middle of a ride is the handlebars coming off. Yeah, they're sure to frighten you pretty well. So anyways, so we have our handlebars now in place. And now we'll go ahead and reinstall our headlight. Our next step is going to be reinstalling our front headlight here. So basically we just set the headlight back up, we pick it back up from where we left it down, and we reinstall the 5 nuts, the four little bolts to mount it, and the 1 nut and bolt for the adjustment. And there we have our bolts, each with a drop of Loctite on them, back in their place, and also the adjuster nut there, gleaming in the middle there. He's back in place as well. And we'll wait till it gets dark. It's probably a good idea after you've finished doing all this, when it gets dark, just adjust your headlights so it's aiming where you want it to be. Okay, next step is to install and tighten down our fork brace. I know I said at the beginning of the video I'll be replacing this one with a much thicker aluminium unit, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in the process of making it, so I might throw a picture of it up later on. So anyway, drop a Loctite on each of the bolts, and I've already tightened most of them, just this one to tighten. A good firm nip up or till it's fairly tight without stripping out the head of the Allen bolt. And there you go. Next step is to reinstall your front wheel arch. Righto, so now we're putting in our wheel arch. The wheel arch comes up through the forks like that. I've already put this one bolt here on. I've slipped the next one in the diagonally opposite corner, and I'll just show you how the bolts should go. So in between there I have a little washer with a shoulder on the side there and the nut, and if I just change fingers, lighting's terrible as usual. And that'll just go up in there like so. Alright, and that's our wheel arch installed. So it's just an 8mm socket head from below, and 3mm Allen key on top, and just tighten all the nuts up like so. We're going to install the front wheel caliper now. 2 bolts, 14mm head, and they each have a good drop of Loctite on each bolt, and in the manual it says 30 to 48 Newton meters of tension on the bolts. So anyway, we just set him in there and tighten him up. Nice and easy. Triple check. Nicely done. And there's our brake caliper installed, ready to accept the wheel. Also, we're going to install our clamp here on the line and tighten that little bolt there with a 10mm socket head on it, and your other clamp for your brake line as well. Install that and tighten it up. So now we're ready to reinstall our wheel, but before we do, just got the axle bolt here, and I've just put a little dab of grease there, and what we're going to do is just smear that all over the axle, just to help stop any rust forming on the bolt itself, and so it's a little bit lubricated. Yeah, just for the inner races, or the inner mounting surfaces of the wheel bearings. And on the left hand side, we're going to reinstall our speedo drive. It's a little bit difficult to do. I think we just need to rotate it a little bit. Like that. So it fits in. Done. Okay, so we just installed our wheel. We basically just took a little bit of coaxing, but it's back in between the brake pads and the caliper there. So we're just going to take our spacer here, flick him up in there and install it like so, and then we're going to lift the wheel up and insert the axle through so the nut is on the right hand side or the throttle side. And that's our front axle installed. Bit of grease there came off, but that's alright. Spacer all in place, and get a look down the brake caliper at all. Yep, it's nicely in place, and we have our thread sticking out. So now what's left to do? Good drop of Loctite on the thread. Our washer and our nut. Now what we do is tighten that up and tighten it to the correct torque setting, and then we check all the work we just did, make sure all our bolts are tight, everything's back where it's supposed to be, all the levers and cables are routed correctly, and you should be good to go. And so that's changing out your steering head bearings. So thanks for watching. This is Slippery Mongoose. If you have any questions or queries, or would like any more information, visit gstwin.com. Just a quick afterthought for the video. I told everyone I was working on my fork brace here, and here it is. It's a nice thick piece of aluminium there. Took a little while and a little bit of fiddling around, but I got there in the end.